Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name's Vanessa Clarkson and I'll be your chair today. Thank you for joining us. So today we'll be talking about transforming the university foodscape for health and sustainability. And today's webinar is an initiative of the Nourish Network, which is a multi-sector collaborative network working together to transform food retail. So we're joined by three guest speakers, three slots today, 4 speakers altogether. And so let's crack on. So during the presentations, we'll just do a bit of housekeeping first. Please keep your microphone on mute and your camera off. As we go along, you can pop your questions in the chat box, or we do have some time reserved for questions at the end, and you can raise your hand at that point and you can ask your question then, or you can pop it in the chat box then, whichever you prefer. This is the agenda for today. So we're just running through the housekeeping now. Then we're going to have Sophie's presentation first. What is a campus foodscape? Eating, buying, selling, growing and sharing food in US universities to better understand institutional food environments. Then we'll go on to Gary, who's going to be sharing his work and the work of the Campus Food Action Team of the Nourish Network on developing a benchmarking framework. So benchmarking the healthiness and environmental sustainability of campus food environments. And following Gary, we've got Victoria Hobbs and Chris Livaditis, who will be sharing their work on the Deakin Food Charter. And then, as I say, we've got 10 minutes or so for questions, and then we'll wrap up. So before we go to our first speaker, we'd just like to do an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. We recognise that country has always been a place of sharing, teaching and learning, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our acknowledgement to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders with us today. So again, welcome. Thank you very much for joining. And I'd now like to hand you over to Sophie Lamond, who's going to begin the first presentation. Thank you, Sophie.
Hi, thank you. Let me just share this screen with you. Now, can I just confirm that you have the title slide there?
Yep, that's great. Thanks, Sophie.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you very much to Vanessa Clarkson. She's done a really tireless and wonderful job putting this together. It's been a bit of a long time coming because, as we know, 2020 was a bit of a slow year. And also to Gary Sachs and the team at Deakin for putting this together and the work that the Nourish Network has been doing over the past, say, 18 months. I think it's really important, and I'll touch on that a bit more. And I'd also just like to extend Vanessa's acknowledgement of country. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. Welcome any emerging leaders in the Wurundjeri community, and to really acknowledge that the millennia of years of knowledge that we have in terms of our own foodscapes around us. It's important to enjoy, respect and draw on that Indigenous knowledge, and I think that can be applied in lots of different settings. I'm just going to quickly pop my timer on to make sure that I don't go on far too long. So I've got quite a lot to say, and please pop any questions you have in the chat. I'm going to do my best to keep on top of that. But maybe Vanessa, if there's a particularly pertinent question, you could just let me know. Because I'm sort of keeping my eyes and ears on several different things at once. What is a campus foodscape? So this is the content of my PhD research that I'm doing at the University of Melbourne Law School. I'm interested in how institutions participate in the food system and what it is that they're doing to help us transform towards healthier and more sustainable food systems. So just a very, very quick overview. I'm just going to give you a bit of a snapshot into the higher ed landscape in the US, because I think it's important to acknowledge the differences between what our experience of being in university is versus the US. Just a really brief overview of the methodology I've been using for my research, just to give you some context, and then just dive into some examples, which is the sort of international aspect of this seminar, because that was always my interest as I was doing this kind of work in Australia and really wanted to understand better what was happening in other places. So just as a really brief snapshot of higher ed, there's around 4,500 degree granting institutions in higher education. And I think, compared to Australia, where we've sort of got the group of 8 and then probably around, I think, total 25 universities, it's a very different landscape when considering the sheer volume of what we're talking about, which includes nearly 20 million students. So, and nearly 4 million staff. So if we're looking at this community of people who are eating food every day, that's essentially the population of Australia. And I think it's really important to understand the scope of how much money this is and, the potential impact that could have on spending that money on a transformative food system. $48.9 billion is just spent higher education food service, and that's split sort of equally of in-house operations. That's where universities as corporations manage their own food service versus externally managed, which is at 40%. And that then is dominated in very high concentration by these 3 corporations, Sodexo, Aramark and Compass Group, which obviously has, corporate concentration has a lot of disadvantages, but the other side of that is that there is actually quite a distinct group of people that you can lobby, and then when things change, they can change quite quickly. The other thing I think that's really important to understand, because again, it's very different to the Australian experience, is that you go to university and you're fed, and that's often really compulsory. So it gets less so as you go through. But if you're a first year, you're often expected to become a resident at a university college in a dorm, often a shared room. And part of that is that you have to buy into the meal plan. And so that can be up to like $7,500 a year, sometimes around $4,000 for a public university. But essentially there is both a large cost to students, and I think it's really important to remember what that means in terms of who can access education, but also a large influx of cash into these systems. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind while going through these kinds of projects, that they are really exciting, but they also obviously have a cash flow that is going through this kind of service that really allows for some of the funding for these kind of initiatives, I think. Also important to acknowledge that food insecurity is a really, really big problem in US campuses. So around estimates up to 43.5% of college students in the US have experienced food insecurity, which is quite mind-boggling. We're looking at sort of 45% of students, which is much higher than the national average. So the buying power of Pell Grants, which are for low-income students, is much lower than it used to be. The cost of tuition is much higher. There's also a lot more students of colour and first-generation students entering university, and they probably may well be experiencing housing insecurity as well. So there's a lot of reasons that's getting worse, and I think certainly in the pandemic there's been some really interesting responses, which is slightly outside the scope of this research, but I think is, there's a really rich vein of research available there to how institutions can respond to crisis. So in terms of what it is that I've been doing, my interest was, my initial question really was at a basic level, what is happening on campuses in terms of food, because a lot of the research is sort of sits around the level of, yes, there's something, probably not very much, and it's quite dispersed. And I suspected that probably wasn't true. So I tried to come up with a way to work out what was happening. All of your institutions, if you belong to a university, are probably members of the Australian Campuses Towards Sustainability, which is the Australian arm of an organisation called the Association of Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. And they run this program called STARS, the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, where universities report on their activities to sort of create a benchmarking system for sustainable development in universities. And so that's around the world, but I was interested in US universities because I was quite sure that that's where a lot of this innovation was happening. Unfortunately, to get that data, you have to download every question individually. So I have downloaded hundreds of individual spreadsheets and compiled that data. So what I first did was look through all the questions in the STARS reporting framework and sort of identified ones that I thought would have information about food activities in them. And so some of those yes/no questions, some of them are percentage-based questions, and some of them are open-ended, which allow universities to tell more of a story about a particular activity. Identified that there was 131 questions that had some relationship to food activities or potentially relationship to food activities. and identified 306 qualifying institutions in the US. So from that, I compiled all that data and resulted in 24,410 individual fields of information to analyse, which I am slightly regretting, but nonetheless very interesting. And so for some of those reporting fields, they were quite general, and so I filtered those again just to leave the answers about food. So things like, is your campus operating as a living lab? Yes. I then filtered those reports just to make sure that I was getting things about food and growing food rather than, say, solar panels or water projects. I also went and did fieldwork. I was very lucky to get some funding from the University of Melbourne, which I'm very grateful for. And I went to 10 universities in 7 states, interviewed 26 practitioners in campus foodscapes, and that included students, academic staff, dining services staff, gardeners, a lot of different people. Doing different kinds of projects, and really made sure that there's a mix of public universities, private universities, Ivy League. So I didn't want to get just like one type of university. Unfortunately, due to, I guess, the constraints of travel, I probably stuck a little bit to the coast, so it may not be as representative of all geographic elements of campus foodscapes, but it was the best I could do in a sort of short trip. And again, very lucky, I returned back to Australia on the 28th of February last year. And if I'd left my research a month later, obviously it would have all been shut down for COVID. So I'm still incredibly grateful for the opportunity to have managed to get this really rich fieldwork in before the world basically collapsed. Here is a really dorky photo of me standing in an organic vegetable system in California State University, Chico, which is sort of in Northern California. And you may know the area from Paradise, the campfire that happened 2 or 3 years ago. So this is a really good example, I think, of a campus community having to deal with things like disaster and responsiveness and crisis. 8,000, I think, of their students lost their houses in the Paradise and those fires around there. And then that obviously massively drove up the rates of food insecurity. And there was some really interesting data coming out of that fieldwork about how campuses can respond to that kind of thing. So just, as a really basic overview, I guess the important question is, what is a campus foodscape? So the really basic answer is all the food in an institution. Again, COVID raises questions about things like food banks that are, when students are off campus and we're all going virtual, it may extend beyond the physical side of the institution, but incorporates things like policy, material flows, the labour that's happening both to get the food to the campus as well as it being served to students, infrastructure, social and cultural relationships around food, the political structures of who's making decisions. And so all of that, I think, is to be considered and becomes quite complex. Obviously, this is quite hard to read, and I don't intend for you to be able to see all of it, but I'm happy to share it if anyone wants to get in contact. So when I went through all that data, what I've been doing is basically mapping individual campus food activities. And so far, I think I'm up to about 400 individual activities that I'm identifying as part of, activism and policy and campus foodscapes. And so that's broken down, this is a bit more clear, into things like curriculum and research, health, waste, food waste and organic waste is a big part of it, energy and operations, campus grown, hunger. And, so just to sort of see one of those branches, campus grown food might include skills and community building in something like a community garden, as well as the ability to provide produce either to community, to the dining services on the campus, through to things like demonstration aquaculture and beekeeping projects. And again, local food. I'm just going to flip through these quite quickly because I want to show you some of the examples I came across. So each of the following slides are photos that I took during visiting campuses in the US. One of the things that really surprised me is that most of the dining halls that I went to really had a focus on, really telling stories about local food. And I should mention that the campuses I chose to visit were ones that I picked out from the data as having these really rich responses to campus foodscapes. So I don't want to say that this is indicative of all higher education, but I was impressed in several. So on the left here is from Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And there's on the right, Portland State University, and the middle two, I think, are from Massachusetts. So, and they're all just saying like, this is where our food came from. And they've like named each of those farms individually. So they've got quite a detailed response to the idea of local food provisioning. Growing food is another really big theme. These are all from campuses in California as campus farms, and they again have that sort of community benefit, but also the skills building and community building within campuses. There's a huge focus in the data. I'd say that probably the most represented category is organic waste management. And I think this is just some interesting kind of examples of things like at the Portland State University dining hall, getting students to sign up to a pledge to waste less food, student generated posters around educating other students, peer-to-peer learning around food waste, as well as quite infrastructural responses like offering compost bins, which were on most campuses I went to actually. I think the US lacks in a lot of things around food, but it actually has really good infrastructure around organic waste management. This one is for Victoria. She was talking about some cooking lessons. So things like this I think are really interesting. So posters that I found, a demonstration I went to for staff about healthy cooking at University of California, Berkeley. One that I wanted to highlight here was from California State University in Chico about learning to cook a meal. I think it's an important thing to highlight as well in terms of differences, that there are a lot of flexibility in curriculum in the US around things like a single unit that you can do as a bit more of a filler for your course, like your course load. We don't really have that in Australia where you can just do, so you can see here there, it says somewhere a sole credit. So it's like a one, doing this will get you 1 credit towards your degree completion, which is not really an academic activity, but it helps that. So we don't really have that space in our curriculum for those kind of extra activities. This is a lecture I went to in Berkeley, walked into the classroom to see this giant table of vegetables. You can see Alice Waters down here and Bryant Terry, who is a food justice advocate and chef in the US. And this homework assignment of find some new friends in the class and to cook a meal. So this quite involved, hands-on, it's called edible education. So sort of really getting into the idea of the tangibility of food and sharing and cooking food. Basic needs and hunger. This is the food bank at UC Berkeley, which I think is really extraordinary. Students are able to, if they're in need, they don't have to, they've got to, I think, present a student card, but they don't have to demonstrate anything more than that, and can take as much as they need from the food bank, which had this huge fridge full of frozen vegetables, as well as sort of staples like pasta and oil and that kind of thing. I just wanted to highlight one project as I'm wrapping up as an example. So this came out of the desktop data, not my own research, but say, for example, the Virginia Commonwealth University Learning Garden, which was set up in 2015. And so that's used for curriculum. So the students in this course, Food Will Win the War, Food Policy During World War II, planted and grew their own victory garden for the duration of the course. Students help grow the food. Some of that fresh produce goes to the campus food bank for dealing with student food security, and then some of that goes to a local health centre, which is a heart healthy centre for people without insurance, and then those food boxes are given away. So I think it's really important not just to put these things into individual categories, but to think about the way that campus Foodscape projects can actually really deliver multiple benefits, and don't necessarily cost very much to deliver in the scheme of the kinds of things that go on in higher education. And I've only got a few seconds left, but I'm just going to run through these last couple of slides very quickly.
2 minutes, Sophie.
I've got 2 minutes. Okay. So higher ed food service in Australia is obviously very different to this influx of cash we're seeing in the US. So there's not necessarily a pool of money which can be used to help fund these projects. And one of the continuing themes throughout the US examples is that a lot of those small projects are actually funded by grants from the dining service operations. Something I found in my own work is that there's very little infrastructure for food distribution on campuses. We still have a food security problem. We don't necessarily have staff either at a professional academic level whose job it is to do policy around things like food. And it's usually reliant on people who are the loudest voices, who can be persistent enough to be champions to do that, rather than allocating resources to creating that kind of policy. Possible intervention spots, I think, in Australia are that we can build these kinds of networks that we're doing exactly what we're doing now. Looking at local food promotion, working as vendors to talk about local food procurement. University residential colleges are one of the few places, and staff catering, that do procure food. So interventions there potentially. Looking at legal interventions around retailer leases. And then obviously as universities can do more research and cultivate student activism. And the intervention points, I think, are the policies that we do have that are not food policies, might be things like health policies, student life programming. So what responsibility do we have for care, pastoral care to our students? Looking at developing a national charter, which is something that they have, say, for example, in Canada. Looking at social procurement agreements as a way for intervening, and sustainability policies. Right, that was my real crash course through everything, but I'm obviously happy to chat more. But I believe we're going to hand over and then return to questions at the end. Is that right, Vanessa?
That's right. That's perfect timing. Thank you very much, Sophie. So just to echo what Sophie said there, just a reminder that if you've got any questions as we go along, you can pop them in the chat box, and then the speakers can have a look at those while we're going through the webinar, and we'll respond to those in the question time, or you can save them until later. So thanks, Sophie. You can disappear and have a breather and a cup of tea while we move on now to Gary Sachs, who's Associate Professor at Globe. Gary's here today to share his work and the work of the Campus Food Action Team on developing a benchmarking framework for campus food environments. So I'll hand over to Gary now. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, and hello, everybody. So this presentation is really a work in progress, well, an update on our work in progress to benchmark university food environments in Australia. And I'm hoping to also get some more involvement in this project. So we're hoping to recruit universities to be part of this benchmarking initiative and to join our network. So that part of this is really an ad for some of the work we're doing. I've only got a few minutes just to tell you about our plans so far. Just having problems moving to the next screen. Just give me a second. So hopefully you can, that's all working fine. The premise for this benchmarking initiative is that universities love a good ranking. So I think all of us in the university sector know this. And so we're planning to draw on this ranking idea to rank universities on their food environments. And so we know from some other experience around benchmarking food environments that it can be really effective at drawing attention to the particular health and in this case, environmental issues, and identify opportunities for improvement and engage the right stakeholders in the process of change. So for example, I've just put some results from some work we've done scoring the big food companies in Australia, which drew a lot of media attention, and has evaluation of our work there has shown that this benchmarking idea does lead to change. We've also been through the Informers network. We've rated governments on their obesity prevention policies, and what we found there is that by comparing states against one another, you do notice lots of variation in state government policy implementation, and that can help share best practice, boost people's knowledge about what's going on, and hopefully lead to some change as well. The idea is kind of to try repeat an exercise like this, but by scoring all the universities and I guess pitting them against each other. So to help us do that, through the Nourish network, we were able to set up what we called the National Campus Food Environments Action Network, or just Campus Food Network. And many of you on the call have been involved in this network. The aim of this network was to get people together from across the different universities in Australia, so including operational staff, so people involved in campus services and health promotion on campus, as well as nutrition researchers, to try and get improvements in campus food environments. So through this network, we've been developing a framework for what we think university food environment should look like. And the idea then is to support the various institutions to try and improve their policies with this network in place to help share best practice. So thanks to all the work of the Nourish network for helping facilitate this. So we got this going last year, and we've had participation from about more than 30 people from about 12 universities, which is a good start, and then we're hoping to increase our engagement with others over 2021. So a key thing that the network has done, and this was led by Janelle Kwan, who's now working in the Victorian government, was to develop a framework for how we're going to score universities, and I guess it's a blueprint of what we think good practice is in the area. So to do this, we divided what we came up with indicators of what it is we think universities should be doing. So the three components are around just university systems and governance. So this is the high level leadership at the university level for which commits the university to improve their campus environments from a nutrition and environmental sustainability perspective, with funding and platforms for engaging students and retailers to do that. The second component is around the campus facilities. So things like what types of stores are available, what marketing is there on campus, things around catering, skills development, which is, I guess, a lot of the things that Sophie just presented on. And the final pillar of our assessment is at the store level. So we have benchmarks there to assess what individual stores are like, what foods they offer, and the promotion and price related things there. And for that assessment, we draw on state related frameworks, such as in Victoria, there's the Healthy Choices guidelines to help us assess things at the store level. So the idea is you add all of those things, you assess a university, add it all up and give the university a score out of 100, and highlight areas where they're doing well and areas where they can improve. So as part of this network, we've developed a process for applying that. The process is very much designed to be collaborative, so in conjunction with the people at the university who are responsible for food environments, so the idea is to work with the university to collect information about what their food environments look like, identify priority actions, and discuss that with them with a view to helping the university improve. This is my last slide. Just an update on where we're up to with this. It's been more than 12 months to develop that framework based on the literature and based on the existing frameworks that are out there, tailoring them to the Australian context. And we've now developed the training materials and the protocol for going out and scoring a university. And we've managed to sneak in a pilot assessment towards the end of last year. With COVID, we were a bit restricted about where we could do those pilots, but and that pilot went really well, and so that sets us up to roll this benchmarking tool and process out to other universities over the course of 2021. So a few of you on the call have indicated your university would be able to participate, and so we're hoping to over 2021 work with the universities around the country to try and assess, get a few assessments done, and then hopefully pick up examples of best practice, and then through the Nourish network, hope to assist universities to improve by sharing best practice and I guess identifying where people need help and who can contribute. So if you think you'd like to be involved, or your university would like to be involved, please get in touch. And yeah, thanks to Vanessa and the Nourish Network for getting this up and running.
Thanks very much, Gary, for that presentation. Great. Okay, again, please pop any questions in the chat box as we go along. We'll now invite Victoria Hobbs and Chris Livaditis to speak, and they're going to be sharing their work to transform Deakin University food environment. Great, we can hear you, Chris.
Thank you. And can you see me now? Welcome. Can you see the screen, as in the slides?
We can see the slides and we can see you, Chris.
Fantastic. So welcome everybody. We'll go through some of the progress and some of the background during our presentation. So our first slide regarding the guiding principles of the Deakin Food Charter is based, in essence, the healthy, sustainable, informed, easy and balanced pillars. The creation of working groups by way of background has been from its inception, including senior management and members of the nutrition faculty. during the presentation some of the guiding principles in relation to what we've sort of been the essence of the implementation plan. Some of the key messages as of today, thankfully, even post-COVID, has been that most of the behaviours you see have been embedded across all the pillars, and is now thankfully being part of just our university culture. So this is sort of a timeline of sort of the key milestones across 14 sort of 4 campuses, 14 venues. We have a hybrid model of management and lease agreements. We have the benefit of a centralised tool system called Vectron that is supported by the university IT and feeds into our finance system. So over the period of implementation and development, we've transitioned 4 operators since the beginning of 2017. We've embedded the principles of the Deakin Food Charter in 2 EOIs, and one including cafe operators in a new building LC. Our law building opened last year in August of 2020, and a food trucks. And the perspective that we're sort of presenting is sort of the commercial lens, basically focusing on the financial focus on the project deliverables and our progress. So as far as the depth of detail in the sort of journey from 2017 has been in research regarding supply chain, gap analysis based on feedback, understanding the Healthy Eating Advisory Service, green, amber and red challenges, predominantly development in what we call the cakes or the sweeter items, the immaturity of supply chains. In total, close to 600 odd meetings with operators, stakeholders and suppliers, over close to 2,500 recipes assessed in the Healthy Eating Advisory Service food checker. Ongoing reporting, measuring, auditing and analysis has now been embedded, and Victoria will go through some samples as far as in the presentation, including organic waste initiatives, etc. Thanks, Victoria.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Hobbs, and I'm the Project Officer for the Deakin Food Charter. So I'm going to take you through, excuse me, let's move my screen a little bit. I'm going to take you through some of our targets and how we implemented them across the campuses and our food venues and the 5 pillars of the Deakin Food Charter. So I'm speaking mainly in the pre-COVID environment, though we've also done some amazing work during COVID, and we've got some exciting things to come in the future. So at this point, I would like to acknowledge the work of Emily Massey, who was the project officer on the Deakin Food Charter prior to myself, and she did a huge amount of work rolling out the initiatives in the food charter. So in terms of the health pillar, the Victorian Healthy Choices Guidelines were used as the framework for assessing the food and beverages at Deakin, with an overall target of greater than 50% green, healthiest, and less than 20% red overall menu offering. So they were our targets. And some of the initiatives that were rolled out included trying to prioritise the display of healthier foods and drink items at the customer's eye level, and to encourage the retail food operators to use fresh and seasonal ingredients. So the key challenge was and still is helping the food operators and the chefs to understand that healthy food doesn't have to be more expensive or that won't be in demand by customers. Also a key challenge was helping to educate Deakin students and staff group about what actually constitutes healthy eating, because as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, there's a lot of diversity in the community opinion about what constitutes healthy food. The next pillar is the informed pillar, and it's the main point here is about using evidence-based information to implement practical strategies to help improve the health and well-being of students and staff in the Deakin community. So traffic light food and beverage labelling allows customers to make an informed choice. So they can still buy the hot chips and the other red items. However, they can know what they're actually buying and they can make that choice. We also seek customer feedback from the community to help inform our food offer and to help them understand the food charter. Some of the challenges that we've experienced are communicating what the traffic light symbols mean to consumers, and the surveys that we've done have indicated there is sometimes a little bit of a lack of understanding, so that offers us an opportunity to do some marketing to help educate the community. Sorry. Okay, the balanced pillar is acknowledging that we have a diverse community and we need a diverse food offering. So allowing choice, but also ensuring that there's commercial viability for our food operators, because they are often small businesses, and that's very, very important to them. So various dietary needs are catered for, including vegetarian, vegan, low gluten, and halal certified. And a range of portion sizes are also offered. We note that competitive price points in the food offering is really important, particularly to the student community. And so we benchmark the pricing of common items against local competition. So we do that annually. So the chart you can see is the green items are where the Deakin average pricing is lower, and red it's a bit higher, which may be due to the fact that our food operators have implemented many different initiatives across the food charter, including many sustainability initiatives. The easy pillar, it's an extension of the informal learning environment, whereby our cafes and restaurants are pleasant spaces to eat around our campuses. There are grab and go food options available, which is convenient for students and staff during their busy schedules. During pre-COVID, we had 97 vending machines across the campuses, and the vending contracts were renegotiated to embed the Healthy Choices guidelines into the digital planograms. We also have put in place an approved supplier register, which makes onboarding food trucks a lot more streamlined. And food trucks are a really exciting and fun part of the campus life and a big part of eventing. Sustainability, it's a core value of Deakin Uni, and Campus Services Division work closely with the sustainability team. You can see some of the initiatives that we've implemented. Some of them include water refill stations around the campuses. We banned the plastic straw in our cafes and restaurants. And an organic food waste program was rolled out with our waste contractors, whereby organic waste is placed into bins and taken to a facility in Geelong where it's processed. As you can see from the graph, the year ended 2019, we saved 45,000 kilos of food waste from going to landfill. We also have 50 of our vending machines include plastic bottles that are made from recycled plastic, which creates a circular economy, creating demand for recycled products. And we've engaged an organisation called Reground to look at compostable packaging to roll out across our food venues this year. We will also be reinvigorating the Skip Zero Cup Swap program, and I'd love you to have a look into that a little bit more. So it's not just a Keep Cup program, it's actually a cup swap program. So one of the challenges with sustainability has been finding the balance point, again, between commercial viability and also what truly the best option is from a sustainability perspective, and balancing what the community would like, tap water being an example, versus bottled water in vending machines, and also revenue to the university and the commercial operators that work in our environments. So one of the metrics we used to measure the implementation of the Deakin Food Charter was the Balanced Scorecard, and it measures how implementation is going across the campuses and across each pillar. And as at March 2020, as everyone from Melbourne will know, when COVID really shut us down, we reached 89%. And as Chris mentioned, a lot of the behaviours embedded behind these initiatives are really embedded in the culture of the university now, and no one really even notices. They're just part of the landscape now, which is absolutely fantastic. So student engagement is a really key part of the Deakin Food Charter strategy in terms of communicating the benefits of the Food Charter, and we also really want to understand the student perspective. So I helped get involved with in some interactive seminars that we held. Georgie Russell was the unit chair for Healthy and Sustainable Food Systems. And during the seminars, we used Mentimeter to poll students' awareness and understanding of the Deakin Food Charter. And we used Padlet, which was really exciting to enable the students to go into our venues, take some photos, come back to the classrooms and do essentially a Healthy Choices Guideline audit to look at the ratios of red, green and amber for them to really understand and have that experiential learning about how to implement a healthy eating policy in a university. We also collaborated with Deakin Student Life to develop an internship project for a nutrition sciences student. And she designed a survey so we could understand what students perceive of the Deakin Food Charter. And we got some fantastic information about that, which I'll share with you in a moment. So that survey provided some great insights into the student voice. And as you can see, it was really fantastic to understand that the Food Charter had influenced what they buy when they're at uni. And we also got some really constructive feedback as well on what we could improve on. And it was just great to have some evidence base around, because we live and breathe the Food Charter every day. So it was really amazing to understand how students perceive it. We've also been collaborating with researchers, and Chris Livaditis worked closely with Miranda Blake, who has authored, with the others noted there, a research paper called Favourable Commercial and Health Behaviour Impacts of a Healthy Vending Policy at Australian University. So this paper is not quite published yet, so I have to say we would ask that the infographic related to it shown here is not distributed. However, there's some amazing findings there that implementing a healthy vending policy is healthier, but it's also commercially advantageous. Because the industry doesn't often understand that you can have healthy food and beverages that are also going to make you money. So this paper is really, really exciting, and I'd encourage you to look into it. And finally, what's next for the Deakin Food Charter? So Chris and myself and the Campus Services Group will be looking at an overall retail food strategy for the COVID normal environment, once again factoring financial viability of the operators and how we are going to continue to offer healthy food for the diverse community. We're looking at a new EPOS, which is electronic point of sale, an implementation of a superior operator-driven EPOS solution that's cloud-based and includes capability for traffic light sales reporting and integrating into live operating systems across all venues, with a view to hopefully reporting on sales of healthy and not so healthy foods, so we can understand if interventions can actually help and perform the research on that. We want to do a marketing communication strategy for the Deakin Food Charter, including a calendar of events to raise the profile and understanding of the Charter. Sustainability, always really, really key for us. As I mentioned earlier, a Skip Zero relaunch and retail food packaging audit, and also further collaboration with our research partners, research projects targeting food insecurity, retail resource toolkits, and university retail environment benchmarking. Student engagement, really, really important. We've got, as Sophie mentioned, some exciting initiatives coming up. We have a placement and an internship that's been set up for T1 for nutrition and health promotion student to work with the Warn Ponds estate, the executive chef there, to develop some healthy recipes and some cooking classes, which will be filmed and put on social media. And we'd love you to have a look at those to help students understand how to do healthy cooking in groups, different dietary needs, etc. So they'll be exciting projects from students.
1 minute to go, Victoria.
Thank you. Our key networks, we are going to further collaborate with the Cancer Council, Nutrition Working Group, Nourish Network, of course, and creating new supply chains, and very, very exciting, and looking forward to working with everyone. So please reach out to Chris or myself if you have any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Victoria. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. So thanks to all our presenters today. We're now going to move on to some questions. We've got some time for questions. So just a reminder, you're all now welcome to turn your cameras on. It's always nice for us to be able to see our audience and who we're speaking to today. Please keep your microphone on mute unless you want to ask a question, and we'll invite you to speak. Please make sure you've assigned yourself an identifiable participant name, although I think you will have, we don't have any Donald Ducks in the audience today. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand when your name's called and unmute yourself. And you can activate your camera if you haven't, if you want to, or you can just pop your question into the chat box. So I'll stop sharing my screen. I'll just change my view so that I can see you all. So thanks everyone. So you're all there. We're just waiting for Chris. So we've got a few questions here in the chat box that I'll read out first. Thanks. So we'll go to Anna's there asking lots of questions like usual. Thanks, Anna. So it's a question, I'll work backwards. Question to Chris and Victoria, really impressive. Love your scorecard. Is it very time consuming to put that together?
I was just typing the answer. Thanks, Melissa. I think once the initial setup, as far as the sort of criteria that we wanted to report on, and yeah, I think it's once it's embedded, it's quite easy. I think the initial agreeable terms of what's important as far as more so for senior management to see the return on investment as far as what are we measuring, how are we measuring it again, and then sort of looking at where the leverage of the funding is. So for example, sustainability in our pillar was massive in 2019. So therefore the weighting was a little bit different. So I think once that weighting was sort of collectively agreed upon, yeah, it's embedded in part of our reporting. So not time consuming is the answer. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Great, okay. There was another question for you, Gary, around the trial that the pilot that you ran, and whether you could share any other information around that.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Anna. The pilot seemed to go really well in that it demonstrated. So how we did the pilot was the university involved. I don't think I'll tell you who they were, just because yeah, haven't disclosed. We haven't got to that point of sharing results. But they had some student volunteers who were doing a student placement with one of the researchers. And so we were able to demonstrate that we could train them in use of this tool. And there were, I think, 4 of those students, and they went off and audited the campus and chatted to who they were supposed to chat to, collected all the info, and all within a 4-week placement. So it didn't cost us any money. The students were able to do it. They were really engaged, and we were able to end up with a score out of 100 for this university. So I think it worked really well. Also the score. So when we came up with this framework and the scoring system, we're hoping that it will be able to differentiate the different universities, like the ones who are doing well, hopefully will score nice and high. I was pleased to see that the score of this university was about somewhere between 30 and 40 out of 100, which is kind of what I expect a lot of universities to be. So from that point of view, it went well. Like we didn't want them to score like 2 out of 100 because that kind of wouldn't be right. But also, I think due to the comprehensiveness of this tool, I would have been surprised if they scored like 80 or 90 out of 100. So I think it was a pretty good pilot, but we will pilot test it in other universities too.
Thanks, Gary. That answer the question, Anna? Yeah, great. Sophie, over to you now. Thanks, Gary. There was a few questions for you, mainly around sort of collaboration and whether you feel like there's opportunity to collaborate with some of these international partners that are doing this work, and perhaps just also for my interest, how much of what you've seen in the US do you feel would be transferable to the sorts of food environments that we have on campuses here?
Thank you, Victoria. That's a great question. Look, first of all, in terms of networks, I think there's a huge amount of potential. And obviously, you know, my choosing of the US was just the necessary evil of doing a PhD and having to put some parameters on it. So I think Canada as well has an extraordinary amount of campus foodscape action, and in some sense might be a bit closer to our own experience, or even if it's just culturally. The UK as well, again, both those markets, or both those regions have university food provided for them, maybe in different ways, but again, that does create some differences. But I think pedagogically, there's a lot of opportunities, I think, in terms of, you know, the frameworks and monitoring, and even things from an infrastructure point of view of one of the, I think it didn't actually end up in my final slides, but one of the things I quite liked in like nearly every US campus I went to, all the water fountains had a little electronic counter that ticked over as the water came out saying, this many litres have been saved this week, or this many litres, you know, and it was just part of the bubbler was that it did that for you. You know, in terms of buying, you know, this composter works really well for this kind of situation, this water fountain works really well for this situation, we built our teaching kitchen like this, that kind of thing. So I think certainly in some of those really practical questions, that collaboration is like really vital. One of the other things I've been doing with my big messy mapping is mapping all of the organisations that are involved in this, and there's, you know, several hundred. But in terms of things like knowledge sharing networks, there's certainly things like the Post Landfill Action Network or the College Council for University, I think it's University Recycling and landfill action, whatever, you know. So I think there's a lot of knowledge sharing networks around things like waste and around solar panels and energy. There's only about 2, and even they're quite specific around food. So I think food tends to be put into all these other categories around things like sustainable development or waste or infrastructure. So I think one of the findings from my thesis really is that there needs to be a bit more connection to the community practice centred around food, because a lot of organisations are doing really great things and often doing the same work, even in the US, aren't really talking to each other or don't consider themselves part of the same community of practice. So I think there is a real opportunity to start that kind of thing. The caveat to that is there's so much labour that goes into that kind of thing. And as Gary can say, even just rolling this out, I think the committee of people that have been working on this over the past year have all, you know, I can say really enjoyed it. But at the same time, you know, that's all work that we're sort of doing just to get something rolling on top of whatever else is we're doing in research. So I think it also comes with questions around who is the right kind of organisation. Is there an umbrella organisation to sponsor that kind of thing? And, you know, who can do that kind of work to connect those voices together? I was saying to a friend the other day who asked me sort of a similar question, well, what would you do about it? And I was like, well, you know, I could say this is the kind of network that would be really useful, but I'm not a practitioner embedded in US higher ed, you know, so it wouldn't make any sense for me to do anything about it. The best I can say is, hey guys, you should do this thing. So I think the initiation of those kinds of things does have a bit of a serendipity required for them, or the right people to be in the right place at the right time. But I think certainly reaching out and making international networks is something that, you know, we can talk about. And I think one of the really great things about going to do field work is making some really, really good connections and seeing some of the sympathetic opportunities. In terms of difference, I think the cash problem is a really big problem. You know, like there is just thousands and thousands of dollars coming through these university dining systems. And as I said, if you've got 45,000 students, they're all paying $7,000 a year, even 1% of that going towards projects is a lot of money that we just don't have. That's not to say that I think we can't do something like that. My question is, you know, the SAF money that all university students have to pay, part of that is food and retail. I would advocate to say, why not say $80 from every single student has to go into food and community building projects, and that's something that we can just advocate to be sectioned off to these kinds of projects, because they actually do go into a lot of things like gyms and sports and other kinds of retail opportunities. So we do have that money, but it's hidden in a very bureaucratic sense and with a lot of competing demands on it. So the advocacy that would have to go into that is quite different. I think the cultural situation is quite different. I think some of the racial tensions about food justice, those conversations in the US are very, very different. I think food security is a very, very different problem. I think it's a much worse problem in a lot of ways in the US. That being said, I think their college food banks are really, really good. And I think it's something that we're really bad at. And I think that's an opportunity for an example of something that we could actually learn a lot from.
Thanks, Sophie. That was a really great detailed answer that you just provided there. Wonderful. We're all about connection here in the Nourish Network, so that's good to hear you speak about the importance of that. We've come to time now. Just before I bring that to a close, I'll just look at our speakers today and see if anyone had any final thoughts, anything they wanted to add. You're all just staring blankly at me, so I think you're all very happy with what you shared today. Sophie?
I was just going to say, I think someone in one of those questions somewhere sort of said something about connecting to other parts of the food movement. I guess I'd be interested to hear from the audience. Is there anything that you think strikes you as a real opportunity for collaboration in terms of bringing outside actors into universities? Because I think that is something that the US institutions are really, really good at, is that kind of collaboration. And especially like the collective buying power of going, okay, well, our three universities are near each other, let's work together to work with, you know, local farmers or something. Does anyone else have any sort of entry points they can see for other parts of the food movement into universities? Is there something we can be doing better to serve the food movement? I'm sort of, if I was in a room, I'd be staring pointedly at Leah right now. I don't know if she can hear me.
I can hear you. Thanks, Sophie. I mean, in the US, they do have a remarkable number of non-government organisations that really facilitate change within institutional environments, whether it's hospitals, universities or schools. My question to Gary earlier today was, in the framework, I couldn't see procurement, and he's going to come back to me to see whether it's actually perhaps another layer down, because I think that's essential that we think about impacting the contracts arrangements that caterers have, and perhaps it is in there. But yeah, those non-government organisations, you know, they have tools and guidelines and work with students to really push for the change that the students want. So it'd be excellent to see more of that being facilitated, and you know, experts working alongside students so that they have the food environment that they want. I wholly endorse that. That'd be brilliant.
Super. Thanks for your thoughts there, Leah. That's wonderful. Great. Well, thanks to all our speakers there. I'm just going to share my screen again and draw this to a close. And I need to go back a slide, I think. Oh, just start all over again. Oh, it's going to not work now. I think you can see that, hopefully. Oh, there we are. Thank you again to all our speakers today, and for all of you for coming along. The slides and the presentation will be made available on the website, and we've recorded this today as well, so you'll be able to watch that. I'll make sure that link gets sent round to everyone. We'll also circulate a short survey so that we can gather thoughts on how it went and any future webinars that you'd like to see. And I will just leave the chat box open. If there are any remaining questions or thoughts that you've got from today's webinar, please pop those in. What we'll probably do is compile those and some of the conversation that's happened towards the end of the webinar today, and pop those up as a news post on the website. And then just to say thank you again for your interest and contributions. And if you're not already a member of the Nourish Network, I obviously have to plug that at the end. So please hop onto the website and make sure you join. But other than that, we've just come to time, so I'll leave you all now to go and enjoy your lunch. Thank you again to all the speakers, and thank you for you joining today.
And thank you, Vanessa, for all your hard work organising this. It was one of the most seamless webinars I've been a part of.
Thanks, Sophie.
You're here.
Check the post.
Just as everyone's leaving, if anyone wants any more examples or more detail, I'm aware I really had to rush through a whole lot of stuff, so please feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Sophie.